I was driving home from a weekend camping trip, the kind where everything feels fine during the day, but once night falls, every sound in the woods sticks to your skin. It was late past midnight, and the highway stretched out like a black ribbon across the land, empty and endless. The only lights that came were from the occasional flicker of a dying street lamp, casting ghostly halos on the cracked asphalt, and the distant glare of headlights from trucks roaring past like angry spirits. That's when I saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road, thumb out and head bowed low, and it was wearing a long, tattered coat that dragged against the ground like dead weight, the hem fraying into shadows. At first, I drove past instinctively, my hands tightening around the steering wheel without even thinking. Something primal inside me whispered, "Keep going," but something else made me glance in the rear view mirror. And I saw that the figure hadn't moved. It was still frozen at the edge of the road. But somehow, it was closer than it should have been in the few seconds it took me to pass them. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a sharp electric jolt down my spine. At some point, I thought to myself maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe the highway exhaustion was finally getting to me. I should have listened to every warning bell blaring inside my head. I should have kept driving, but instead, like an idiot, I slowed down and turned around. My tires crunched against the gravel shoulder as I pulled over a few feet ahead, the engine rumbling nervously beneath me. I kept the car in drive just in case, but something about the way the figure stood gnawed at my instincts. I finally called out with my voice trembling more than I meant it to be. "Need a ride?" The figure didn't answer at first. For a long moment, it just stood there, motionless. Then, slowly and almost painfully, it lifted its head. That's when I saw it. Its face was wrong. It was not grotesque. It was not bloody, but distorted, stretched, and drooping like a wax sculpture melting in the heat of a relentless sun. The features sagged, slightly out of proportion, as if time itself had softened and corrupted them. Every muscle in my body screamed to leave, floor it, get away. But before I could even process the fear fully, the figure moved. It glided into the passenger seat without making a sound, no opening or closing of the door that I could hear. But suddenly, there, settling into the seat with an unnatural stiffness, I noticed two things immediately that were so wrong that clawed at my sanity. First, it was ice cold. Not just cool from the night air, but an unnatural, aching cold that filled the entire cabin, freezing the breath in my lungs. Second, it stank. It felt like a damp, suffocating odor, like freshly disturbed earth after a rainstorm mixed with the sharp, metallic scent of rust or blood. The smell of something that had been buried and had no right coming back. We drove in silence for a long, choking stretch of road. I tried stupidly to break the tension, asking where it was headed, but no response. They simply sat there, head tilted slightly downward, staring blankly through the windshield. Each breath they took was slow and shallow, fogging up the glass, even though the night was warm enough to make my skin stick to the leather seats. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy and suffocating, like sitting next to a grave that had forgotten to stay closed. I told myself it was fine. This is just a drifter, someone down on their luck. Maybe a little strange, but harmless enough. But then the radio turned itself on. It wasn't music, and it wasn't a talk show. It was pure static, loud and violent, bursting from the speakers with a force that made the entire car vibrate. It got me startled. I fumbled with the dial, twisting every knob and slapping at the buttons, desperate to shut it off. But nothing worked. The static only grew louder. The deafening noise rattling inside my skull and vibrating through my bones until it felt like the car itself was screaming. I could feel the static crawling under my skin, buzzing in my teeth, pounding in my head. And then, from deep within that sea of blinding noise, the hitchhiker finally spoke. Their voice wasn't a real voice. It sounded like a sickening scrape of something sharp, being dragged across broken glass. the words forming slowly and painfully. "You shouldn't have picked me up." I slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched in protest, and the car skidded sideways, coming to a jerking halt in the middle of the empty, deserted road. My heart was beating so hard that it hurt. My hands clenched at the steering wheel in a death grip. I turned to yell at them, to demand who they were and what they wanted, but the seat was empty. They were gone. The passenger door hadn't opened. There was no sound, no trace. There's no way they could have slipped away into the night without me seeing. I began to shake so badly that I could barely press the pedal. I floored the gas and sped home, my headlight slicing through the empty darkness like a blade tearing through a thick curtain. Every mile felt longer than the last, the empty road stretching forever ahead of me like it was trying to trap me inside it. When I finally reached my house, I double-checked every lock twice. My hands trembling so hard I struggled to fit the key into the door. I made sure I turned on every light, flooded the rooms with a harsh, artificial glow that barely kept the shadows at bay. I even opened every closet, peered under the bed, and checked behind the shower curtain like a terrified kid, playing at being brave. I kept telling myself it had all been an hallucination. Just exhaustion, just nerves, nothing more. I even forced out a nervous laugh, thin and shaky, the sound dying quickly in the heavy air around me. Maybe I just needed sleep, I told myself. Maybe a strong cup of coffee would snap me out of it. Or maybe it was just a bad dream I hadn't fully woken from. But then, when I finally sat down on the couch, something cold brushed against the back of my neck. A touch so icy, so deliberate that my skin erupted in goosebumps. I leapt up immediately, my heart exploding in my chest as I spun around wildly. But the room was empty, silent and still, except for the couch. There, sunk into the fabric of the cushion, was an imprint. It was so deep and fresh, as if someone or something had just been sitting there beside me, close enough to reach out, close enough to whisper in my ear. The weirdness did not stop. Every night after that, at exactly 3 a.m., without fail, my car alarm would shriek into the night, breaking the silence like a scream. Each time I would rush outside, barefoot and shivering, heart hammering against my ribs. I found the same chilling sign, muddy footprints leading from the driver's side door and vanishing halfway across the driveway. Funnily enough, there were no broken locks, no shattered windows, nothing out of place except for the footprints, wet and real, a mocking reminder that something had been there. And every time I dared to drive at night, it returned, the weight in the passenger seat, shifting subtly, as if whoever or whatever was riding with me was getting more comfortable. The faint pressure leaning toward me with silent intent. The soft rasping sound of breathing that filled the car, even when I was completely alone. And the delicate lace of frost curling across the inside of the windows, frosting the glass from within. Even in the suffocating heat of a sweltering summer night. It wasn't just a hitchhiker I had picked up. I had given a ride to something that was never supposed to leave that lonely stretch of road. Something that had been waiting for someone foolish enough to stop, someone foolish enough to invite it in. And whatever it was, had no intention of ever letting me go. If you ever see a hitchhiker on an empty highway, don't stop. Don't look back. And whatever you do, don't invite them in, because some rides never end. If you want to hear what happened next, and trust me, it gets even worse, make sure to subscribe to Insidious Inc., smash that like button, and turn on notifications. And if you hear breathing behind you right now, don't turn around.